This is Chris Collinsworth. Be sure to check out the PFF College podcast as our experts provide insight on all the league's top stories. Every game, every player, every play. Download and subscribe on iTunes or your favorite provider.
Hello and welcome back to the PFF podcast. With one firing in the books, the floodgates have opened. Another one has gone down this week. Gus Bradley from the Jacksonville Jaguars is gone, fired. Brock Osweiler was sat down, benched, $72 million worth of quarterbacks sitting on the bench. It's an NFL bloodbath right now, but me and Mike are still back. Sam Monson here, Mike Renner as always. Mike, it's chaos in the NFL. People are dropping like flies. It's a war zone out there.
It is, and I'm actually feeling a little bit down. I just got some bad news. I've heard that Margot Robbie got married over the weekend.
Yeah.
And that was a shot to the heart. She's the same age as me. I always, thought sometime down the line there could be something there.
I mean, it would be inevitable, really. That was.
And she just hadn't found me yet.
No, exactly.
Oh, well.
So that's your entire life plan, really, just gone up in smoke this afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, and I don't know how I'm going to get through this if I start crying halfway through the podcast. Now you guys know why.
Yeah, that's rough. I thought, things were bad with guys getting fired and benched and sat down, but no, you've brought some clarity to the situation and a bit of context for everybody. Really, we've now seen what's important in this life, and it's that you will no longer be Margot Robbie's first love. Maybe you can get,
I'll settle a second.
Yeah, maybe you can get a second marriage. When the first one breaks down, you can be there to sweep in and show her what she was missing this whole time.
We can hope.
Exactly. Yes, we will all hope for you, Mike. I'm sure that's what everybody wants for you to end up like. This was a week of NFL fails. I think a lot of things happened this week that seem to be symptomatic, emblematic of the bad things in the current NFL. And, it's important not to get too over the top with this stuff, because the bottom line is football's awesome. Everybody loves it. That's why we do this. And, the good dramatically outweighs the bad. But there's some really stupid things that the league does that just have no logical reason whatsoever. And the first one was last night with Zeke Elliott's celebration. Zeke Elliott scores a touchdown, runs into the end zone, sees a giant Salvation Army bucket prop sitting at the back of the end zone, and jumps into it. And there's not a human being alive that thinks that wasn't a good idea as a celebration. It was funny. It was spontaneous. Al Michaels is laughing, on the commentary booth. The NFL is putting this thing up on their own media as, a funny event that happened during the game. Highlights of the game see Zeke Elliott jump into the Salvation Army. But it's a penalty. He gets flagged for the celebration. And I don't know whether he's gotten fined or not, but typically that's the kind of thing that will get you fined as well. I mean, what on earth is the logic behind that?
I don't mind some penalty. It was getting out of control for a little bit with the props. Joe Horn putting a cell phone underneath the goalpost. Guys pulling signs out of the stands. I can understand that, but things that are choreographed dance with your teammates, things that are somewhat spontaneous in nature, not necessarily purely over the top brand plays. I could give a damn about. I don't know why they're flagged. You're just taking away you're just impacting a game for no reason whatsoever. No one was out there. I mean, there's probably someone out there writing to their local, small town newspaper complaining, but no one was actually out there complaining about this going on, and they felt the need to, remove it from the game for no reason whatsoever, basically.
I can see a case that, if you've had to bring in and stash props, you shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Yes.
If anything happens to be around you at the time, you should have absolute free reign to do whatever the hell you like to celebrate your touchdown. As long as you aren't wasting 5 minutes worth of game time. But, it was a T.O. who grabbed the cheerleaders' pom-poms. Or the popcorn, even from
popcorn. Oh yeah, that was great.
T.O. has a list of half a dozen of these things that make they make highlight reels. Even now, the NFL will play these things as promos for whatever, and all of these things are banned. Every single one of these things now would get you a 15-yard penalty and a $10,000 fine. It's ridiculous. Like literally, if you made some kind of rule that said, look, you can't bring in special staged props for your celebration, but after that, go nuts. How would that harm the product?
No, and it comes down to the fact that they're making these decisions. It's like a handful of decisions that they're making that are no one's asking for. No one's asking to change extra points to this meaningful play. No one's asking to change, the rules of celebration. Like no one cares about these things that are going on, yet they feel the need to either, drastically alter them to supposedly improve the product, and no one out there thinks it's improved afterwards.
But I mean, if anything, it has to be a detrimental thing. Like everybody thinks these are funny. Like I said, the commentary of Al Michaels is laughing at it, and everybody's loving it. It goes up on websites as the front page thing. It is good, and yet the NFL bans it and thinks somehow that's a better thing. Like I said, maybe if you want to draw a line for the most excessive stuff, fine. But to just blanket ban like all but the most sterile celebrations is just ludicrous. But
no, yeah, I agree.
I think there's I want to get on to the next fail thing, and these are two particular plays that are kind of go together because they're all to do with this push the NFL has to make the game safer, to eliminate contact to the head, and all this kind of stuff. And the first one was a hit by Darius Butler, I think, of the Indianapolis Colts, on wide receiver Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. Ran, I think, a post route or a go route over the top of the cornerback. Had to get around that corner, ball arrives, makes the catch, and Butler comes in and absolutely levels him from his safety position and breaks the pass up. Ball is incomplete, and out comes a flag because there's helmet-to-helmet contact. The second one was a sack of Drew Brees in the Arizona-New Orleans game, where as he's going down, he gets clipped in the head as part of the melee of bodies coming together in this giant pile of a sack, a group sack. And that drew a penalty. I think that was third down, would have taken them out of field goal range. It was a real swing in that game, and instead they get a first down, they get set up, and they're good to go again. Now, I understand that this is a game that we want to try and make safer because, so much or so little was done to protect players for so long. But at some point, you have to you have to understand that this is football, and we have to draw a line and stop trying to sanitize it, because otherwise in 10 years' time, we'll all be playing flag football.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. There are two big things here for me. The first one is, I don't know how you can ever have a roughing the passer call when a guy is sacked. Unless you face mask a guy, you have tackled the quarterback. You have done your job. How can you possibly rough a passer if you actually bring him? If he hasn't thrown the ball away, you're just tackling a ball carrier at that point. I'm not sure how you can ever have a roughing the passer call, even though, it happens all the time like we see. The second thing is, they just need to do a better job of intent on hits, on defenseless receiver hits. When you're leading with the shoulder, when you're aiming at a low angle, that should never draw a flag. If you're aiming high and, launching yourself upwards in the air, even if you miss, those should draw a flag. Guys get penalized a lot because receivers, where their helmet is changes. Sometimes their helmet's, 3 feet off the ground because they're falling, and then you hit their helmet because you didn't realize they were going to be there, and all of a sudden you get called for a flag when your the angle of your attack was perfect in the first place. Like, you had no chance of not hitting him in the helmet. That's just what happens in football. But then there's guys like, Brandon Merriweather back in the day would go so high, launch his helmet right at guys' helmets, miss them, not get flagged because he missed, but the intent was there. Refs just need to do a better job of seeing that, or even after the fact, fines need to do a better job of assessing that.
I don't think you can make this a zero tolerance policy for helmet to helmet contact, because there's just no account for physics in that. If you've got two guys heading towards each other at a significant pace, any significant hit between the two of them is likely to result in one of the guys' head snapping forward and launching his helmet down towards the other guy. Like, even if he hits him in the sternum, if you're hit hard enough in the sternum when you're traveling forwards, that head is going to come down and there will be helmet-to-helmet contact. Now, the hit was completely legitimate, but because that guy's head swings down, if you wanted to do a zero-tolerance policy, you would have to be basically aiming at the hips and nowhere else. Like, anywhere else is going to result, any higher than the hips, is going to result in some form of helmet-to-helmet contact. And that's assuming you somehow manage to avoid making your own helmet contact with the guy as you're trying to hit him with your shoulder. It's just, I mean, it makes no sense in the way that, you know, in soccer, there's a kind of almost a zero tolerance thing that if you don't get the ball and you launch in like that, if you contact the guy with your leg on his leg, you were late, you didn't get the ball. It doesn't matter if it's split second, it's a foul. But I don't think you can do that in football because the physics just doesn't work the same way.
I feel like football needs to. I'm going to propose a rule here that, or not even a rule, just a change. They need to have a group of, they need to make some penalties reviewable and have it be a speedier process where, kind of like the MLB, where it's done by a group of people watching TVs, getting the clips right away, and it's called upon immediately. And, it just a quicker process of saying, hey, that wasn't actually, I want this to be reviewed. I don't think that was a penalty. They review it, and then it's not a penalty. I just think that needs to be a part of the game because some penalties we see have such a drastic impact, and basically what the ref says goes. And, on calls like that third down sack, never should have been a roughing the passer call, but all of a sudden that changed the game and Arizona loses because of it.
I've kind of ranted about this before. I don't know if I've ever done it on the podcast, though, but the fining culture that the NFL has as well drives me crazy because, like, it's one thing to throw a flag and penalize the guy in a game for a foul in that game that affects the game. So you go in and you lay an illegal hit and you get flagged 15 yards. It costs you then and there, done, right? Why are you then taking money out of the guy's pocket for doing that thing? I have a certain amount of sympathy for the idea that you can find people doing something flagrantly unsportsmanlike. If you try and start a fight, or if you, you abuse officials, or you do something crazy like that, I can kind of see why you could fine a guy for that. But if you've just been playing football, like, they're fining guys for face mask penalties. You can get
anything inside the flow of a game
exactly.
to be fined for is crazy because it's like they just haven't played football and don't realize that things actually happen that you can never you could never have prevented if you're trying to play sound football.
Well,
you just couldn't have prevented it.
It's not like fining the guy is a punitive measure or is a deterrent because they're not intentionally grabbing the face mask. Almost all. I mean, sometimes you're grabbing the face mask because the only thing you can get. There's the occasional deliberate face mask just to get the guy down. But 90% of face masks are accidental. You're grabbing something, it happens to be the face mask, it's unfortunate. You get flagged, done. The guys are then losing like $15,000 out of their paycheck for accidentally grabbing a face mask in the course of a game. Like, and for a guy like, and Ndamukong Suh say, that's a drop in the ocean, it's nothing. But for a guy who's on the roster bubble, making the veteran minimum, losing 40% of that in tax, losing another 10% in agents' fees and management and whatever, that's a serious chunk of that guy's weekly take-home you're taking away from him for essentially accidentally grabbing some guy's face mask.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's thousands of dollars. Could you imagine I couldn't imagine getting fined thousands of dollars for anything right now. And it's not like, and like punitive. You said, there can be an undrafted free agent. He could play 3 years in the NFL, and make $1.5 million over those 3 years, but get fined, $100,000 if he's a guy who takes chances in the secondary. It's like all of a sudden you're screwed because you're losing, 10% of your income that you were trying to rely on for the rest of your life because the NFL, overreaches their bounds a little bit.
Like, if you're going to fine people, it needs to be as a deterrent to try and stop certain things happening. So, mouthing back at the officials, contact with the officials, say, starting fights, whatever. Stuff like that you think, okay, we're going to fine this guy, we're going to make a statement that this is not acceptable to happen on the field. But you can't take money out of a guy's pocket for playing the game the way, everybody wants it to be played and just being unlucky, committing a penalty, because those happen. That's why penalties exist. You're already punishing the guy. Taking money out of his pocket is just an entirely punitive thing to tack onto it because it's not deterring him from doing it because it was an accident. He didn't mean to do it.
Yeah, and then it goes back to my original point. I think everyone who's listening right now, and everyone around the world agrees with us, and no one was calling for heavier fines, yet the NFL implemented them. So
those are our 3 fails, I think, from this week. Is the completely ridiculous celebrations. Why are you banning these? Get rid of that. That's ridiculous. I think there needs to be some review of helmet to helmet hits. You can't play football and eliminate helmet to helmet contact. It just physically is not possible. And even if you want to do it with defenseless receivers, the entire offensive line butts heads every single play, and we're fine with that. Or a running back gets hit in the head every single play. Like, how many times did they replay that Chicago Bears running back getting the decal knocked off his helmet with one of the most jarring helmet to helmet hits you're going to see all weekend? But he's a ball carrier running between the tackles, so we choose not to care. It makes a great little slow-mo video. But like, if that happened to a receiver at 25 yards down the field, we'd be in uproar and claiming this is an injury waiting to happen. So you can't pick and choose which head impact you choose to care about. You either care about head impact or you don't. And the NFL or football is just too much of it's too intrinsic. You can't remove head contact from the game, so you have to choose which ones you're going to try and eliminate. And I think we've gone too far at this point. We need to swing that back in the other direction and just take out the ridiculous, like, launching face first into a guy's head kind of deals. And then our final one, which is fining people over anything and everything, for no particular purpose other than to flex NFL muscle, which is, as far as I can see, what it is. See, we're doing well here. We can run on this platform, and I think we can make some changes.
Yeah, we could even we talked about consulting, NFL teams. We'll consult the whole NFL. Like, we'll consult the NFL league offices if need be.
I don't know if we want to consult for them as much as we want to come for Rodgers' job.
Well, yeah, we'll consult for the commish.
Rodgers getting paid a lot of money. I think we could do it, the two of us, for a real fraction of what they're paying him. You know? I mean, he's getting paid, $45 million, something like that. I don't know about you, but I would be willing to do it for 10. And then put the two of us together,
I don't know, 10, maybe a little more. All right, we could probably get 15.
15, okay. We'll both settle for $15 million each, and we're saving the NFL $15 million a year. I mean, you can't say fairer than that.
Yeah, 2 guys doing one. Yeah,
exactly, and they're getting 2 for 1. This is like the best deal that's ever been presented to them. I'm going to start sending off the letters as soon as we're done with this podcast. But let's move on now to one of our weekly segments, and that is, how the hell did the Tennessee Titans beat the Kansas City Chiefs? They ran the ball all over Denver, and I was so sure that this wouldn't happen this week, and I didn't see any way they would beat the Chiefs. What happened, Mike?
Well, I mean, short answer, Andy Reid called that timeout and, made that field goal not count, the game-winning field.
Icing.
Icing, which, I mean, it's so I was going to say, icing is so intrinsically, in coaches' nature that they feel like they have to do it. I feel like at this point, kickers just expect it. Making them kick it at this point is so much more psychologically. That ball gets snapped, and he, in his mind, he thinks, "Oh crap, I actually got to make this first one now." So, long answer. The Chiefs just kind of it kind of was a game that they always play and that they seem to win more often than not because their defense makes those stops at the end. They play that kind of low variance. Their games are always close. They can win very convincingly and still have it be a close game with 2 minutes left, but they kind of handled the game. They handled the other team the whole game. This was kind of one of those games. They looked like the better team for much of the game, and then 2 drives at the end that Tennessee gets, and Alex Smith basically didn't play. He played a kind of one of those classically poor Alex Smith games where he's not awful, but one mistake kind of ruins their whole game, and that was the post route in the end zone to Jeremy Maclin. Man coverage, perfect coverage, just shouldn't have been thrown, and that took points off the board, and ultimately why they lost.
I also like to think that it was the football gods rewarding them for going for the win. Tennessee, they got down there, they scored the touchdown to bring it to within 1 point, and then rather than try and kick an extra point and play for overtime or ask your defense to make a stand and then have another shot at it, they went, screw it, we're going to go for the lead, we're going to go for 2. And okay, they didn't get it because they called one of the most ridiculous plays ever.
You said that. I didn't think it was a terrible call.
Oh,
it was like a 3-level roll. I mean, like,
Yes.
It wasn't awful. I don't think it was awful.
Oh, no, it was bad.
Getting him out of the pocket was good. I mean, I think it could have worked.
You can't, like, when you're down in the shadow of the goal line, you can't spend that much time goofing around behind the line of scrimmage before you get rid of the ball.
Oh, I mean, like, he spent that much time because the Chiefs played it perfectly. I don't think it was a terrible call by any means, though, the actual play.
It's horrendous. Anyway, the point is, I think that the football gods were like, you know what, that was the right call. We're going to make this right, and we're going to give you another shot to win it. And that's what happened.
I 100% always endorse going for two when it's. I mean, they still had quite a bit of time left.
Yeah.
But if it's any time, within 30 seconds, like the Raiders did earlier in the year, 100% always endorse going for it because one, missing extra points is far more, happens far more often nowadays, and two, just. The bounces can go. You can just get screwed in overtime. Like things can go wrong, like in your favor, and you just really don't have a chance. Put it in your own hands. Put the fate of the game in your own hands if you have the chance.
That's what always comes down to me is that look, could you come up with a better scenario than putting the game in your offense's hands from the 2-yard line with essentially one play to win the game? All you need to do is come up with your favorite play to gain 2 yards. And the game is yours. Done. Like that is a pretty ideal scenario if you think about it. You don't have to fight through, we got to move this ball 87 yards down the field in, a minute and a half to get a shot at this. This is our shot. This is all we need. One play. Let's bring out the best play we have from deep inside the playbook and let's run it and we win the game, walk out of here. Like that is the ideal scenario for a coach. And for you to like pass that up because, potentially something else could happen. We basically get more shots at it by doing something else. It seems gutless, to be honest. I mean, this is the scenario that everybody wants to happen, and I think people just lose nerve and pass it up. Granted, teams tried it twice this week and they both failed, but still, I think long term it is the right option. Where this is like a week of revisiting things. This podcast, I like this because a few weeks ago you had, I think, your hottest take of the season. Which was that Dak Prescott should sit out the remainder of his rookie contract until he gets a new contract. Even though I'm pretty sure we discovered that wasn't actually possible, and that therefore renders it.
He would have to retire. Yes. I think I did some research. He would have to retire, and then after the 4 years is up, Cowboys no longer would have rights, and I think he'd be fine, from what I read.
But the general idiocy of the point didn't deter Danny Cannell from coming up with exactly the same point today.
I could not believe it. I literally,
Because a bunch of college kids are now sitting out bowl games. Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, two of the top running back prospects from this year's draft, have both decided they're not going to play in their respective bowl games. I think there's somebody from Oklahoma who's bailed on his as well. So it's becoming a thing that, top college prospects are not risking a horrific injury in that final bowl game, electing to sit out, they're not getting paid, and prepare for the draft. So Danny Cannell took that and went off the deep end and related it to your Dak Prescott hot take.
To be fair, to revisit my take, I wasn't actually dead serious in saying that he should do that. I was just saying if you think, if you're a truther, a guy should sit out years of college, then you should also probably think that Dak Prescott should get it because he is, significantly underpaid for what he'd get. I was somewhat in jest suggesting that he actually should do it. Cannell was a little more serious in saying that, hey, maybe Prescott should actually do that too. I mean, I don't hate his points, and that's why I said it in the first place. I don't think it's the craziest thing I've ever said because it is the very similar argument. I get that, college players aren't paid, but at the same time, they're doing this because of future earnings. Whereas, Prescott would do it because of future earnings potentials. I literally can't believe, though, that someone else came up with it independent of me. Like, that was just fantastic to me.
It is certainly.
And who better than Danny? Yeah.
It is. It's one of the most ludicrous takes that two people have independently come to. I'm not sure. I think you should definitely be proud that somebody like that has come up with the same take. What was interesting is that it does seem to be a topic that's sending people off in a skip whirlwind of lunacy. And people are saying that I think Joe Banner, the former NFL exec, was saying kind of similar things. Why don't these guys, what's to stop a guy who's sitting there on the veteran minimum, a few games out from the final of his contract, saying, you know what, I'm just going to sit these games out. I'm done. I'll come back in the off season after somebody pays me some significant money. What's the difference? Well, the difference, I think, is a fairly obvious and clear one. It's that one of these guys is under contract and the other guy is playing for his school for essentially fun. I think that's a pretty clear line to draw. You may not be getting paid much, but you're getting paid to do this job. So you go out there and you play. The difference between that and a guy like McCaffrey or Fournette, who are not getting paid, get no benefit whatsoever from playing in these bowl games other than helping their team win a bowl game, which, may earn the university money and prestige and stuff, but they themselves personally get pretty much nothing from it. It's unlikely to change any kind of draft evaluation of these guys. They're just risking their health, which has, it's wrecked the careers of guys in the past. You don't need to go that far to find a guy that went out for that final game and never became the player he could become.
The Jalen Smith a year ago, in the bowl game against Ohio State. Basically, if he would have, done what these guys did, or are going to do, and, sat out the Fiesta Bowl last year against Ohio State, not wrecked his knee, probably would have been top 10 pick, probably would have made, had $10+ million guaranteed as opposed to whatever he got there at the top of the second round. And I can't blame these guys. I don't blame them one bit. I don't, it doesn't bother me from a personal standpoint and from a draft stock standpoint. This isn't going to change my opinion on them one bit. But at the same time, if someone is, upset, I don't think that that's not a valid viewpoint to say, I'm a fan of this team, I'm upset. It is the definition of a me first decision to say, I'm going to sit this game out. Yeah. That's what it is. And you can say that. And I don't think that viewpoint isn't, invalid, but at the same time, these guys can do whatever they want. They don't owe the schools anything. They can do what they want, and what's best for their future is probably to sit out these games.
I mean, it is entirely a me first decision, but that doesn't make it a wrong call.
No, yeah.
I mean, the idea is, like I say, at this point, you are risking millions of dollars and your future NFL prospects to turn out for your university one last time, who are not paying you a thing. I mean, yes, you've had your education, but
I think that's why it. I think that's why it upsets so many people, is because, it's a me first decision when college football is supposed to be this, it's about the school, it's about the pride, it's about the love of the game, is what the college purists are all about. And then that, will obviously rub those guys the wrong way. And, purely selfishly, you want to see the best players on the field. So for me, I'm unhappy that he's not going to be playing, because I want to see, the best players on the field when I'm watching a football game. So I get all viewpoints. I don't think that, saying either that, this is right or wrong, it's his decision. He can do whatever he wants, at the end of the day.
It's going to be interesting to see.
My big take on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Just like Dak Prescott can sit out the next 3 years if he wants.
Yeah, a little less so. It's going to be interesting to see if this becomes a big wave of these guys doing it, because everyone's been talking for years that, these guys, really top prospects, should just sit out the final year of college entirely. And everybody says this every single year, and I don't think anyone really has done it yet. And I don't know if they ever will. The whole year seems excessive, but now we're seeing a few guys bail on these final bowl games that mean essentially nothing. It wouldn't shock me if this became a much bigger
I think the Mike Williams and Maurice Claret back in the mid 2000s, when they both took a year or had that year off because they tried to fight the NFL's rules or whatever to try to enter early. That kind of their careers in the NFL kind of, I think, set that trend back a bit, because they both just, flamed out pretty quickly once they got to the NFL. Weren't nearly the same players they were what they looked like in college. So I'm also curious to see if this trends down to high school. Guys, playing high school football, they sign with a school, taking senior year off, because high school recruits, they get injured, you tear an ACL in high school and you get scholarships pulled, you never get to even play college football sometimes. So I am interested to see if this will actually start a trend. I hope it doesn't. Just again, selfishly, I want to see these guys in the field, but I think it could.
Definitely, that's a good point. High school guys, I mean, if you sign for your junior year, why would you go back? What have you got to gain? You got the contract, you got the offer. Sit in the gym for the next year. let's keep the body under wraps. Well, let's move on from this to, we'll look at some wildcard teams. You know, everyone knows who the favorites in the AFC and the NFC are, but what about some potential wildcard teams that could not just get to the playoffs and, you know, win a game or make it tough for somebody, but who could go there and actually make a run and become one of those teams that goes from the wild card all the way to the Super Bowl and actually wins and takes home a Lombardi trophy?
I have one from each conference, but I think there's one that's, you know, very obviously, that I think is on everyone's mind at this point. It's the Green Bay Packers. Just the way that offense is played over this 4-game winning streak, you know, night and day from that kind of lull that they hit over their, I think it was a 4-game losing streak in the middle of the season. The offense is definitely, it's scary at this point, especially considering the fact that Ty Montgomery looks like an NFL running back, and not just an NFL running back, but a dangerous NFL running back that they can use basically any way you want because he has the receiving skills, because he can, you know, break tackles, and because he can run routes basically as a wide receiver. I think that offense is pretty dynamic, and then the defense has gotten healthier. I think the return of Demarius Randall has helped that defense. There's still some big questions in the secondary, but at the same time, there's not really a team in the NFC right now besides the Falcons that's a high-powered pass-it-down-the-field offense. You know, there's a lot of teams that are, you know, winning with their defense right now in the NFC. So I think the Packers, I don't think anyone else in the NFC right now wants to face the Packers come playoff time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have an AFC one as well?
My AFC one was going to be the Baltimore Ravens. I think I've even touched on this before, just because don't let Joe Flacco get hot in January. I mean, like, he is not playing exceptionally well this year. He's not looked exceptional. Like, even ever since he won the Super Bowl, he hasn't looked exceptionally well. But the thing is, he didn't look exceptionally well. He didn't look exceptionally good before that. So it's kind of, he plays a somewhat high variance game, and if you can get him on that high when he's hitting receivers in stride, when he's not making costly mistakes, they have a good enough defense that they could win the AFC if, you know, he gets hot again.
Yeah, I was going to go for the Ravens as well, and my NFC team is exactly the same logic, and it's the New York Giants. And Joe Flacco and Eli Manning are currently our 26th and 29th graded quarterback. The highest grade of the two of them is Flacco's 71.7 out of 100 scale. So that's pretty bad, although it's nothing compared to Eli's 50.6. But these are two quarterbacks that have really been pretty bad this year. I mean, Flacco's shown more than Eli has, and you know, you get the occasional flash from both of them. But each one of these guys has a history of being streaky, and each one of these guys has had a streak already that has not just like won them a few games and made some noise, but has actually gone all the way and taken home a Super Bowl at the end of it. And certainly in the Giants' case, like this, the supporting cast might be as good now as it has been in either of Eli Manning's previous two Super Bowl runs. I mean, that defense is legit. Certainly, assuming Janoris Jenkins isn't completely bust and he gets back and is healthy.
That's huge for them.
A huge loss for them if he's out any kind of significant time.
Because that nickel, that starting nickel defense, probably the best secondary in the NFL. Just in terms of holistic, with the safeties included, I'd take them over Denver at this point. The way they're playing.
Certainly if you include the safeties. But again, it's what made that Denver defense so great last year, is that it wasn't just one or two corners. It was they could go three deep and match up with your best three weapons. The Giants can do that this year, plus Landon Collins can be a matchup guy against your running back and your tight end. And then obviously what they've added up front in terms of...
They go four deep. Leon Hall as well. I mean, like I'm just saying.
And then up front with guys like Damon Harrison has just transformed the kind of meat of the interior of that defensive line. Somebody kept referring to him as a big addition to the defensive line in the broadcast. Like, I've never seen...
Literally.
Yeah, I've never seen a physically larger human being, I don't think, in that he's so big when you see him in person that he looks small. You know what I mean? It's weird. Like, most big people look large. That didn't make any sense. No, it's because he's perfectly in proportion, right? But just giant in every way. So you see him from a distance, and you can't work out if he's far away or actually small. But when you see him suddenly next to a normal human being, he's absolutely ridiculously massive.
He's one of those guys where, kind of like a Tyron Smith or just like a physically impressive specimen that you want to see what it would be like for like a high school offensive lineman to try to block him, just so you can kind of get a feel for how crazy, crazy freakish he is as a, a specimen.
You wouldn't need an offensive lineman. You would need the entire college offensive line to try and block him, like a 5-on-1 deal. I remember a few years ago, one of the most impressive high school highlight reel tapes I've ever seen was from a defensive tackle called Marcus Forston, who I think went to the University of Miami. It was a Hurricane, and then I think crapped out of the NFL in ridiculously quick order. But he was having these plays where they were legit treble teaming him. So the center, he was playing nose tackle. The center would try and stand him up, and both guards would come in from either side. And he was shedding that triple team block and making stops at the line of scrimmage. Like, if you're playing against that, I mean, what do you even do? You're just like, okay, look, we're not even running in this 10-yard square area. We are going somewhere else because we can't block that. Like,
I want to see.
If a guy that wasn't particularly good can do that, can you imagine what Damon Harrison could do to a high school offensive line?
Well, I want to see what he did in college, is what I was going to say, because he went to William Penn, which is, I'm not even sure what division that is, but he had to be going up against offensive linemen that had, no business blocking the best nose tackle in the NFL right now. I just want to see what his college film looked like. I've never seen it and never seen anyone reproduce any portions of it, but it had to look pretty insane.
We should dig that out. I know Damon likes us. We should ask him on Twitter if he can hook us up with some some snacks, highlight reels from college.
Him just lifting, him just bench pressing a center.
That would be pretty ridiculous. But I think both those teams, the Giants and the Ravens, for the reasons you said, not just because Flacco, but again because the supporting cast there in Baltimore is pretty good. That defense is good. They've added some weapons there on both sides of the ball. They could really make some noise. It just requires both those quarterbacks to actually pick up the play. Because at the moment, both guys are probably the cap on their teams.
Yes, I agree.
I like it. So we cast around. We're looking a little light in the podcast this week. And I asked Twitter what we should cover. And we've covered a couple of things. Actually, do you have a hot take before we get into this? We'll save this for last if you do.
This hot take sucks this week. I'm sorry. It's nowhere near Dak Prescott
You need
level.
to work better on your sales technique. Come on, you got to sell this to the people.
But I think the hot take is that running backs matter a lot more in the NFL right now than it's gone downhill, but I think that it's going to start trending back uphill in terms of running back importance and running back value or running back pay scale. I just think that people from a scouting perspective don't necessarily. It's hard to see what translates well to the NFL because running backs are incredibly scheme specific, I believe. So to expound upon that, a guy who just because Le'Veon Bell is this freakish talent doesn't mean that he could go to Houston right now and the scheme they run and put up 4.8 yards per carry. Not to say that it's the talent difference that matters. It's just the way his running style wouldn't fit necessarily well behind that offensive line or what they run there. So I think pairing running backs with right scheme will also make your offensive line look better. And I just think that running backs in general have a lot of importance, can transform what an offensive line looks like and transform what your running game looks like through. I'm not really doing a great job explaining this, obviously. I would just say running backs matter a lot, I think.
I think that bit is completely true. And I think we've got kind of into this mindset of running backs are these replaceable components of an offense that have no value anymore. We're not going to pay them, and we're going to get them in the 5th round of the draft every year, and we'll figure out the running game that way. And every time you see a team that happens upon a transcendent running back talent, it completely changes what the team is. I mean, Green Bay goes from having an offense that everybody questions what's wrong with it to suddenly, wow, this is one of the most formidable offenses in the NFL the second they get a running back.
You just said it a lot better than I did.
Whether it's Eddie Lacy, on the 5 minutes for a season before he gets too fat again, or whether it's Ty Montgomery and they discover this guy and suddenly the running game is fixed and the offense is back. But you see it all through the league that, maybe how you acquire these guys has changed and you don't, or you shouldn't kind of chase after them with big money and high draft choices. But when you do find those guys, it makes a huge impact. But one of the things I think that's possibly affecting that more than just NFL teams assuming there's no value in running backs is I think it's a lot harder to scout running backs and to evaluate running backs than people assume it is. And that's
what I was getting at too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And people don't know what will translate to it's not necessarily, yeah.
And I wonder if that's scaring NFL teams because they're not as sure anymore what makes a good running back because it's so difficult when you compare it to the college game. The last time I talked to the boss, Chris Collinsworth, for the PFF magazine, he made an interesting point that because of the wide college hash marks, you can set a guy just going on an outside zone play to the field side, the open side of the field, and he has the speed to turn the corner because there's so much room out there. There's so much real estate you have to cover. So you get these guys that can run a 4.3 or weigh like 200 pounds, and they can get to that edge and turn the corner and make these big plays. In the NFL, for a start, the athletes are slightly better, but also there's less field to work with. The hash marks we talked about before, they're tighter together, and you don't have that extra 5-10 yards of running room to make it to the edge. So suddenly you have to run for more north to south, and if you're only 200 pounds, you're getting met in the hole by a 250-pound linebacker. It's not going well for you.
That's like that's the Oregon running back kind of fool's gold type thing where everyone's, these Oregon running backs put up ridiculous stats. Michael James, Kenyon Barner, why are, and then they get to the NFL draft and they get drafted lowly and never produce anything. Why is that? It's because of what you just mentioned.
Because the running room isn't there anymore. It's different.
Yeah.
It's a different game. It's not just, the reason, or one of the reasons that everything in college went to this spread type of offense is because there's more field to deal with because of those wide hash marks. When you narrow it in the NFL, everything evens up, and there isn't that one giant wide area of space anymore. So running backs just don't have the room to work in. It's not the hottest of takes, but it is points that I agree with, which I think is a departure from your usual hot take rhetoric.
That's why I said it was weak.
Yeah,
I messed it.
It's more a good point than a hot take, which is not really what we're going for. But the one thing I want to end on, the one thing that the people on Twitter came back with, and I actually forgot that this even came up, but Chip Kelly was the latest NFL coach to essentially take it upon himself to issue a sermon against PFF in his press conference. We've heard from Mike Zimmer, I think, has taken shots at us, usually when we're criticizing one of his crappy players. Bill Belichick has taken shots at us because Bill Belichick doesn't like anybody assuming that he can do anything to do with football. Who else has taken shots at us? He's got quite a few at this point.
Marvin Lewis back, it was a few years ago now.
Yeah, for actually complimenting one of his players. That might be, you can probably count on one hand the number of people that have taken shots at us for actually being positive about people. But Marvin Lewis is one of that small band of merry men. Everyone else typically rails against us slagging one of their players off. But I think this deserves reading out what exactly Chip Kelly said. So there's a bit of a preamble. A reporter was asking about one of his players. He, I think, commented on grading or quarterback hurries, sacks, that kind of thing, the statistics. Kelly asked him, where does that come from? And the reporter says, Pro Football Focus. And Kelly replies, okay, stick with that. So the guy asks, do you not put much stock in that? To which Kelly replies the following. No, I've said it all along. How can they grade an offensive lineman when they don't know what the play is? I've had it before. Our left tackle gave up a sack. He didn't give up a sack because the guy slanted in the B gap. The guard had the B gap, and that's not the left tackle's responsibility. But it's written down as a sack on the left tackle because you don't know what the play was called. We called slide protection. We didn't call man protection. If someone can look at a film and figure out what we call for a play and know what our scheme is, and then give a guy a grade for it, I think there's a lot of players and coaches that feel the same way. I don't know. You can do whatever you want with it. It's like me going into a bank and grading a teller because they gave me a lollipop. I gave them a 94.3. The reporter says, I'd go 100%. Kelly replies with, it depends on what lollipop. It was purple, and I wanted red, but they gave you a lollipop. But I didn't know they weren't allowed to give you purple that day. So if I did know that, I probably would have given them a higher grade. But I didn't know the information going in. I mean, just before we get into the actual, fair points that he's making, what the hell is he talking about? A lollipop and a bank teller? I mean, what?
First off, how often is he going into banks nowadays?
And why is he asking for a lollipop?
It does sound like a 0.5 grade, though, for the lollipop. I'll just say that. I would give it a 0.5.
I mean, I can see a dentist giving you a lollipop or a doctor, but why are banks handing out lollipops? This is a banking system I'm unfamiliar with.
That doesn't usually happen in America either. It's not like a American thing.
It's not a quaint American
it's like
you go to the bank, you get a lollipop.
No.
So that's a bit of a weird one. But whatever analogy he wants to rock and roll with. But let's do this fairly. Let's address the points he's talking about, because this is a thing that comes up a lot. It's, how can PFF attempt to grade players when you're not in the room, you don't know the play call, you don't know exactly what they're being asked to do. How can you possibly make giant sweeping statements and put a number on a guy? Well,
first, I guess the first point is that I would never expect a coach to use, our grades for his own team. As his, they grade their own players. They know they know their calls, they know that kind of stuff. So I don't like Chip Kelly using our stuff to grade his own 49ers players. That I just wouldn't expect a coach to do that. But at the same time, he has to be watching tape of other players, whether it's free agency, whether it's college, whether it's just preparing for your next game, and on some sort of level evaluating how productive they are, how good they are, and is he doing that based on just purely physical traits, how fast a guy can run, how high a guy can jump, or is he actually saying, he's continuously beating this right tackle, he's beating this guy, he's continuously in good coverage, maybe we shouldn't throw at him, maybe we should double this guy, that sort of stuff. Is he every play saying, oh, hey, I don't actually know the scheme that they're, I don't 100% know that was actually covered to. It looked a lot like it, but I don't know. So I'm not going to say if this guy was in the right or not. He's evaluating players at every single level. And at some point, if you watch enough football, you know what's going on almost every play. I'd venture to say the amount of plays that I can't actually make out, or the amount of, players that I can't actually make out what their responsibility was supposed to be, and there was like a toss up in our grading, is probably less than 1% of, players' play grades that we give out.
Yeah, that I think is the key point in all of this. It's that, no, we can't do it on every single player and every single play to 100% accuracy. And neither can anybody else that isn't in the room. And even in the room you're in, you're only in that one room. You're not in the room for 32 different teams. So nobody out there is working with complete information. But the number of plays where that is actually a factor is tiny. It's so much smaller than you think it is. And when you go through a game, the biggest thing is to just go through it all and actually tabulate everything. It's if you get one play wrong out of 70, but you've gone through and you've got the right information for those 69 other plays, you're so much better off than a guy that just didn't bother doing anything and just went with the eyeball test of what he looked the first time and, remembered a few key plays. Because, I think I've mentioned this before, is that your mind creates this kind of mental highlight reel. You remember the 3 best plays, the 3 worst plays, and you kind of throw everything else in the middle out as didn't really, nothing of significance. But that's where all, the key is. That's 64 plays of the game is those plays. So just by going through and actually attaching a value and, determination to those plays, were they marginal losses, were they marginal victories, were they a complete wash, that's what determines a guy's grade. And the one play that maybe was something crazy happened isn't affecting things that much. And the other kind of real key is that when you do get a play like that we really can't identify, we're not grading it. We're zero grading things. Yep. We're not guessing. We're just leaving it as, look, we don't know what the hell happened here. We're not putting a minus 1.5 grade on somebody.
That was going to be my next point. It's that the plays that we really don't, that are tough to figure out, who was in the wrong, who was doing this, are usually coverage busts, offensive line busts on blitz pickups, that sort of stuff. And then again, that's not necessarily relating to performance. That's kind of, those are mental things that maybe it's just because you didn't hear a call. Maybe it won't happen ever again. It would be nice to be able to tabulate how much a guy made mental busts, but if you're not in the room, you just can't you're not able to do that. You can't really figure out if a guy's going to, have a ton of mental breakdowns when he's on the field. That's not really something you can just see on tape watching anyone else other than, a guy that's on your team. So it's plays that don't really have to do with, your ability to play, your ability to tackle, your ability to cover, those sort of things that are, intrinsically important in football. Yes, not busting coverage is important, but it's not like it's something that's necessarily this incredibly repeatable fact that once you bust, a guy's going to always bust coverages. A guy's never going to know what's going on. It's just something that sometimes happens and can be, multiple people's fault.
Well, and the key thing there is that most players that make a ridiculously high number of mental mistakes aren't on the field for that long. A coach doesn't put a guy out there who every, 10 times in a game is doing the wrong thing from what he's supposed to do. Those guys don't play. So,
unless they're the Jets.
Yeah, maybe it'll happen a couple of times, but if you expect that every single game there's 15 plays where some guy is completely screwing up and doing the wrong thing, and it's just a serial train wreck of guys in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're never going to be able to figure out who's doing what. It doesn't happen that way, because those guys are sent packing because they can't play. And when you do have something that breaks down, a lot of the times you can figure out exactly who it was by the fact that there's one guy that doesn't fit in this jigsaw puzzle. So one of the key things in all of this is that as much as, football can essentially be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it, and at the fundamental level, everybody is running the same plays. They may have little wrinkles and little kind of ways teams do things but inside zone is inside zone and outside zone, and everybody power is power. Everybody's running the same concepts, and cover 3 and cover 2 and cover 1 and all this kind of stuff. And it's just a case of, some guys might play it a little differently. So, some guys might want a full double team on those zone blocks before the other lineman climbs to the second level and takes on a linebacker. Some guys will just stick a hand out. Some guys will essentially just go straight through, but it's all the same play. But when you look at it and everything is working perfectly and 10 guys are going exactly where you think they should go, and one guy is doing something completely different. Now, maybe he was asked to do that, and it's the guy that looks exactly like he should be doing what he should be doing is the guy in the wrong, but the chances are it's the one guy that doesn't fit in this jigsaw puzzle that's the guy in the wrong.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you have a deep enough understanding of the game, it's not, people aren't doing a lot of things that you just haven't seen before. There's not a terrible amount of, incredibly innovative coverages that aren't, blatantly obvious by where players' eyes are, what they're trying to execute. So I think it's a much smaller portion of the total pot than anyone's trying to lead you to believe.
That I think is the key thing, is that, everybody points to the idea that you can't do it 100% accurately. And it's completely true. 100% true. There's no way you can be 100% accurate on this stuff, because there are going to be plays that lead you astray. And without knowing, particular weird call, you're going to be led astray, and there's going to be an error that you can't figure out. But it's the same thing with everybody, and just because you can't get it 100% doesn't mean you can't do it. Like you said, the bottom line is that all these guys do some degree of scouting or player evaluation themselves, and they don't stop because they can't get it 100% right. One of our senior analysts, Bobby Slowick, used to be a coach for the Washington Redskins, and Bobby was a guy who would come in and he would categorize every single coverage for their upcoming opponents, and he would go through the tape. And he would go, they're running cover 3, cover 1, cover 3, 2. And he would just go through play after play after play and just put a label on it, because that's exactly what they were doing. Now, that's what we're doing now. And, Bobby's one of the guys that's helping us do that. But the point is exactly the same. The NFL coaches in Washington weren't in Philadelphia's coaching room. They weren't in the New York Giants coaching room. They didn't know what the exact call is, but it wasn't stopping them sending or having a QC coach or a linebackers coach spend significant amount of time going through and putting labels on these things, because they know that they can do it to a pretty high degree of accuracy, and that's more than good enough for what they want.
Yep, 100% agree.
So I think that answers the crux of Chip Kelly's point. I don't know quite how to help him with the purple lollipop situation.
Still love you, Chip. Still a fan.
Yeah.
I'm still a fan.
I'm confused by the lollipop thing. I don't know how to help him out on that. Maybe we
He's
can
a bit of an odd guy, but
maybe we can send him some lollipops.
Bridge the gap. Have a little
peace offering.
Yeah.
The man seems to like lollipops. He got a purple one. He was looking for a red one. I think we should send him a red lollipop.
Some red. Oh, that would be so nice of you.
Maybe we can send someone to his press conference with a red lollipop. This has got legs. I'm telling you, this. As soon as this is finished, right? We're writing the letter.
I'll go to San Francisco in a heartbeat.
We're writing the letter to the NFL, and then we're sending somebody to his next press conference with a red lollipop, especially for Chip. We may even write PFF on it. It would be, I think, especially nice. I don't think we're going to go to the trouble of getting it like professionally done up, but someone can just, marker something like that, PFF over the top of it. But that's going to do it, I think, for this podcast that went in a bit of a crazy direction, thanks to Chip Kelly's analogy. We'll be back, I think, midweek. We'll probably do a short talking Pro Bowl snubs and just the general lunacy surrounding the NFL's Pro Bowl selections. Those are always fun. I don't know what the story is later this week with Christmas on the horizon. I think we will probably be back as usual on Thursday, but there's a chance that could all go crazy depending on what people are doing. So, stay tuned, and if not, I suspect you will live without us over your particular Christmas period. But anyway, that's it from me and Mike. We will talk to you later. Hope you've enjoyed this. Take it easy.